You've been listening to President Obama there referring to the Ferguson case and Michael Brown. And in the meantime, on that split screen, you saw what was going on there in Ferguson. And we have Steve Myers up top in Sky Fox to give us an idea of what he's been watching. Steve?
Well, Thomas, I'm sure most of the viewers saw we've had tear gas fired up here in Ferguson, and I believe that it began when there were a number of people who were rocking a police car attempting to turn it over. I would show you that car, but it's actually behind where this scene is now. I'm gonna pull out completely here so that you can look at this. That's the Ferguson Police Department on the left-hand side of your screen at the bottom here. Most of the protesters have now moved into this area. They have been forced back by the gas and by the police. They are now being illuminated by the police helicopter. There are still hundreds of folks here that are protesting, but they have moved back. Many threw the gas canisters back when they saw the police. There's always a number of protesters who will come back and attempt to challenge the police. But as you can see, as we go a little further down the street here, the police are now in a standoff with this man who is out in the middle of the road, attempting to stop them. What happens next? Anyone's guess. This was a peaceful protest, I think, perhaps until that police car that did have a back window knocked out was damaged in several of the doors. Obviously people got to that, but I think they perhaps pushed it as far as the police were willing to accept when they started to rock the car in an attempt to turn it over. That was when I saw the first tear gas come out, and they have been moving folks back ever since that time. And obviously, it is their intention to return control of this street one way or another. For now, that's about all I can tell you. This is a bit of a standoff here because you've got protesters out in the middle that are just standing here with police. We're live in Sky Fox. Sorry about that, guys, with the camera. As soon as we can, we'll tell you more. Back to you.
All right, Steve.
Steve, thank you. We're hearing this is not tear gas, that these are smoke pellets that are being fired. That from St. Louis County Police. They have just tweeted moments ago that police are making numerous announcements to leave the roadway. They are being ignored. We just saw that police car being rocked, its windows being smashed, and St. Louis County Police said tactical ops are being deployed. Here is the video of that police car just moments ago and protesters rocking it and breaking the windows out.
And that's ironically was going on as the president in a split screen was asking for peaceful protests and to honor Mike Brown Sr.'s request for peaceful protests in honor of his son who was killed in the shooting.
And that is when we saw police come out in their riot gear. The tactical teams are out trying to calm this crowd down. We have Fox 2's George Sells, who is in that crowd outside of the police department, with more on what he's seeing. George?
Yeah, Mandy, we've actually stepped back a pretty good ways at this point because of all that commotion that you saw from Sky Fox. I'm standing right now, I'm underneath the police helicopter, which is currently shining its light on folks on South Florissant, and I'm not sure exactly what they're looking for. Let me run you back a little bit as to what happened that kind of led up to a lot of this. Immediately following the decision being announced, of course, there was about what you would expect. Some angry voices, some loud voices chanting, a few broken bottles, that sort of thing. A few minutes ago, probably 5 minutes before the president was speaking, we heard a volley of about 4 gunshots down in the direction further south on South Florissant Road toward Interstate 70 from the Ferguson Police Department. That was the first time we saw a lot of people just kind of scramble. Basically, they were getting out of the area as quickly as they could. They went running for it. That settled in. People continued to kind of just sort of stay where they were. There was clearly some kind of activity going on down South Florissant, and that was where a lot of the attention was being focused. A couple minutes later, we heard another round of gunfire go off, 2-3 shots. That was when you saw people just go tearing down the street on foot. A lot of people just ran for it at that point. A lot of the people in this crowd, they were heading north on South Florissant at that point, the people running, just trying to get out of the way. That followed by the smoke being fired up. Don't know if that was smoke or tear gas. We weren't really close enough to tell from the smell of the effect which it was. but you could see the canisters being fired off down the street at that point. That was when you saw more people in the crowd heading up this way. Now, at this point, still have a lot of people in the streets. Not in the street, though. They're staying to the sidewalk. Police began announcing over PAs that basically if people didn't get out of the street, they were going to be arrested. People are pretty much following the lead on that for the most part, though. Now I'm coming down here, and they're sort of starting to filter back into the streets again. I'm looking at a lot of tear gas being fired down in front of the... Okay, yeah, they're firing the stuff off now down in front of the police department. People are kind of scattering this way. The crowd's moving very quickly right now. The folks are sprinting down South Florissant at this point. I don't know if you're seeing this from Skyfox, but people are running for it at this point. They fired off another volley of tear gas, pepper spray, whatever they're shooting into the crowd. But they are clearly at this point doing everything they can to just move this crowd out of here. People are running, trying to get out of the way. You kind of start to smell the hint of it in the air, the hint of the tear gas. But they're definitely firing it off. That's what I can tell you at this point. The crowd now is moving, kind of continuing in the direction where we are right now, continuing north on South Florissant, past the police station. Police are obviously moving in this direction. The gas is getting closer as far as what's being fired, because police, you can just tell from the way the crowd is moving, and you can see it from where I was standing a moment ago up on the sidewalk. I was able to get a good feel for it getting closer. It looked like that last volley was fired pretty much right in front of the police station here. So at this point, a lot of people are just trying to get out of the way. They're just trying to get out of the line of fire. I don't see any signs of anybody injured or anything like that. Okay, we're by a Chinese restaurant here, and it looks like some folks are about to start busting some windows. I think we're getting ready to pull out of here. Hang on 1 second. I think it's time to go. Yes, yeah, we're getting out of here. Okay.
Okay.
George, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we want our crews to get out of the situation if there's any chance where they are in danger or in trouble. We're seeing more gas being fired. This is directly in front of the police department, and we've seen a long, basically a row of police vehicles moving down South Florissant. There are more police officers behind them. All those shots you're seeing are gas pellets.
Yeah, we're trying to determine. George was saying gas pellets. The county police have insisted they were shooting smoke bombs, so we'll try to figure that out for you. But before we go to Betsy in Clayton, one of the things in the rules of engagement that the protesters and the Unified Command had sat down and discussed was one that said crowd control. The protest group is asking that crowd control equipment such as armored vehicles, rubber bullets, rifles, and tear gas will not be used. The Unified Command answered that in saying Unified Command believes public safety will help determine the best tools to keep people safe. So that was one of the areas that they did not agree on. There were some 19 points, and they agreed on some. But as you can see, this one is, it looks like, is turning into quite a confrontation in front of the police department there. Betsy Bruce is in Clayton, where earlier on there were just a small group of people there. Let's see how that has changed. Betsy?
That's right, Tom. In fact, this whole area is absolutely empty, other than for media and a couple of passers-by. We're here in the heart of Clayton, where people did gather to listen to Mr. McCullough's announcement on phones, and only one person really demonstrated his anger, and we can take a look at that in video that we have of a man who threw eggs at the county administration building, 3 of them, that's all, and he shouted out that this was not going to be over, that he called shame on you. This is a travesty of justice. He was arrested by police here, but that was the only arrest that we saw tonight here outside the Justice Center. I did speak to State Senator Nasheed, and she indicated that there needs to be a change in Missouri law that deals with how police officers are allowed to use lethal force. And she promised that she would help write that legislation. So that is what's been going on here in Clayton. At this point, a very, very quiet time. We understand tomorrow morning a prayer vigil is scheduled for 6:30 in Shaw Park in Clayton, to be followed by some protests here in front of the Justice Center. So this is Betsy Verse reporting live in Clayton.
Betsy, thank you. As we continue to show you these live pictures along South Florissant of police moving protesters out of the way and firing those smoke bombs, they say, not tear gas. We have some new information. Granted, I-44 closed due to peaceful protests. That a tweet from St. Louis police. Just one of numerous accounts we're getting. St. Louis County Police tweeting out that there is some looting on South Florissant. So you're seeing a huge, strong police presence moving in as what was a peaceful protest has turned violent, and police are responding to that.
Yeah, we've got several reporters in that area, including Elliot Davis, who is out by the Ferguson Police Department. Let's call him in now. Elliot, what can you add?
You've got George here. You've got George on this one.
Go ahead, George. Can you hear us, George?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. We just kind of relocated out of where we were a few moments ago. We were talking to you. The gas is kind of coming through into the car a little bit as we get through. We kind of got out the back area. A lot of people affected by the tear gas being set off in the area, and I can just tell you that basically you've got a large police presence now. They're out in the streets trying to move people out, basically trying to get everybody to disperse, get people to move, to scatter, and excuse me. And at this point, we're sitting here. Excuse me, I'm sorry. There's a bunch of people talking to us from a number of different directions. We're about a block off of South Florissant now. You can see the police lights up there. You can see the haze of the tear gas and the smoke in the air, basically. It's just kind of hanging there. Fortunately, the windy night, so it's kind of hanging there. It's being moved out fairly quickly by the wind. There were a lot of people in gas masks that we saw. People who brought gas masks with them, reporters, photographers, and just civilians who probably went to the local Army surplus store or something to buy them. So you saw a lot of people with them, but there were many more people who did not have any kind of protection and were being affected by that pretty heavily. But at this point, police have moved through and started moving a lot of people out. We've kind of gotten back out of the way a little bit, so we're a little farther off right now, guys.
All right, George, thank you. We want to tell you what we're doing here as we continue to watch these live pictures. Lacey Clay's getting ready to hold a press conference. We're pouring over the evidence from Bob McCullough. We're going to have that for you in just a second. Let's listen to what Lacey Clay's saying.
My grave concerns about the local investigation into the police killing of Michael Brown Jr. Today, sadly, we see that those concerns are well-founded. The grand jury's decision to not indict Officer Darren Wilson is extremely disappointing, but not unexpected. 2 days after Michael Brown was killed, I contacted U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder to request the urgent assistance of the Department of Justice. I am thankful that the Attorney General and his staff responded with great speed and strength. He has assured me that the ongoing federal investigation will be extensive, vigorous, and will follow the facts to where they may lead. The pursuit of justice for Michael Brown Jr. and his family is not over. While I share the anger and frustration of so many in our community, I ask everyone to be peaceful and remain disciplined and dignified in everything that we must now do As we go forward together to confront the huge disparities that continue to deny equal protection under the law for persons of color in our region and across this nation, that is the best way to honor Michael Brown's memory. Thank you, and I'll take any questions. Yes, sir.
Congressman, are you saying the justice system did not work? Did the grand jury not do the right job?
I don't think it worked well at all, and I think that, you know, it puts St. Louis in a light that it certainly doesn't symbolize a first-class city. It's something less than that. I read a story today about the 3 civil rights workers that were killed in Mississippi who were given the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously today.
You've been listening to Congressman Lacey Clay with reaction to the grand jury's decision not to indict Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson. Joining us now on the set as we continue to show you live pictures of what's happening right now in Ferguson, Pamela Means, president of the National Bar Association. Pamela, you're not surprised by what the grand jury decided?
I am not. I believe we talked earlier about 6 o'clock, and I was asked the question, what could we expect? Most people did not want to face the harsh reality that based on the laws that are in this land, not just in Missouri, but the laws that were issued by the United States Supreme Court, the possibility of a no true bill was very slim. So I'm not surprised at all by what this grand jury, the decision it reached. I'm not even surprised about the response to the grand jury, because I think for the last 2 or 3 months that we've been dealing with this situation, that we have failed as a community and a group of leaders to really prepare the community for the possibility that there would be a no true bill, and what we should, in response to that, do and not do. I know we're calling for peaceful protest, and I understand that, you know, people are looking at what's happening as we're seeing things on fire.
Yeah, we're seeing a fire here and just a woman driving by. We're going to continue to talk with you, Pamela, but just to explain to our viewers what they're seeing.
Yeah, it looks like this may be a trash can. It looks like a bicycle or something by it that has been set on fire there. I don't know how you can call this peaceful protesting. And
you're not surprised by this, and you think it's only going to get worse, is what you're just saying.
Not only do I think it's going to get worse, I think because the issue of police brutality is a national epidemic, we're going to see protests like this across America. And it is going to get worse, because I believe people feel that a lot of people said to them, let the law do its justice. Stay still and the law will handle the situation. However, if we would have been explaining the standard by which that grand jury, who had a very difficult decision it had to make, if we were explaining the standard, then we would have been talking about what McCullough talked about at the end. Let's change the laws so that this never happens again. It's not the result, it's the solution that's connected to the result that really matters. And it's the laws that have to change if we really, around the country, it's not laws just in Ferguson. There was a media person that asked the question, laws in Missouri are such that how could this guy get away with this? The same could be said in New York, in California, in North Carolina, South Carolina, because the law as it relates to what a police officer can and cannot do in protecting themselves is arbitrary and capricious. And until we as a nation deal with that, we're going to see this across the nation. But I'm not surprised at the response, because I believe people feel like they trusted the system and the system failed them.
And go ahead, Tom.
No, seeing a lot of the response here tonight with, we've got one report of a journalist hit by an object, apparently reports of people throwing batteries at the police officers. So
we got a peaceful protester who's been hit in the face with concrete, fires being set. This, you see, looks like a police car on fire.
Yeah. That may have been the one they were trying to rock.
Scene as we are looking along South Florissant Road of a police car on fire. People have been hit in the face with objects. That whole area is cleared, but That's something you just do not see in St. Louis. We've seen this on a response in maybe the Rodney King case and things like that, but we've not seen things like this here in St. Louis. But this is an issue for our entire area as we watch this unfold live.
Yeah, well, I've been in St. Louis a long time, and I don't remember seeing this kind of explosive situation starting back in August and has continued all of this time. Chris Hayes is in contact with us also. Let's bring him in. Chris, what have you got?
Hey, Tom, I'm still up on the second floor of the Justice Center, getting ready to leave, and I don't have a whole lot of time because they want us out of here after the grand jury announcement. But, boy, looking down on Central and Carondelet, the street could not be quieter. It is so dark, other than a few lights being shined on the street by the satellite trucks supplying an empty parking lot. But I see maybe 2 people on the streets and 2 police officers. And just an interesting contrast to what we've heard from George Sells and from what some people expected to be the center of large crowds coming to see and hear the decision here outside of the Justice Center.
All right, Chris Hayes in Clayton, thank you as you're looking at live pictures from there of the police car on fire. Earlier, they were trying to rock that, at least one of the police cars. This may be the same one. And that brought a police response with some smoke bombs and clearing out the protesters. And now we see a police car on fire. There were also reports of batteries being thrown at police and protester injured, also a journalist hit.
And this is a live picture from the ground of that police car that is on fire. And we're seeing police trying to clear the crowd and move them back. We've seen a lot of the smoke pellets that have been fired. And in a situation like this, police have told me that they get a lot of criticism for using tear gas, but that's the only way that law enforcement has of dispersing a large crowd without causing injury. And that's the tactic that they use to break up a large crowd. Now, they're telling us it's not tear gas at this point, that they're firing smoke pellets, but what was a peaceful protest clearly has turned violent.
Yeah, let's move over to Dave Murray. He's watching, keeping an eye on the weather that these people are dealing with out there.
Yeah, weather-wise, it's actually quiet, but we do want to give you a quick look at the 5-day forecast here just for planning purposes. For Tuesday, it's a quiet day, plenty of sunshine, lighter winds compared to today, 39. Wednesday, we have a little Alberta clipper coming through. It's cloudy, it's breezy, a light mix of rain and some sloppy wet snow. Not anticipating any problems because temperatures will be above the freezing point, 40. Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, partly sunny and 36, so kind of a cold day. Friday, partly sunny and 48 and up to 55 on Saturday. There you go, guys.
All right, Dave,
All right,
thank you.
Dave.
We're trying to get in some weather and some sports into our newscast, but we're going to go back to these live pictures because they are dramatic. Fires that are burning. We've seen several fires set along South Florissant Road. And all of this reaction to the grand jury's decision to clear Darren Wilson, saying that he was justified in his actions and it was not excessive force, and that he will not be charged and will not be indicted.
No, and when you see a response like this, I mean, the protesters are saying they don't want the police to militarize and bring in the heavy artillery, and yet you see things like this going on when the protesters say they have a right to protest, and they do the peaceful protest. But everyone's been saying, the leaders that have held the news conference after news conference after news conference said, you know what we want to do is protect your right to free speech and to protest, but we're also going to protect property and the people around, everybody's safety. And it's deteriorating tonight.
They've moved people back away because that car exploded. The gas tank's exploding and the fire's getting bigger, so they've tried to move people back. Police are trying to keep people safe in all of this. Their biggest fear has been from the very beginning, when this grand jury decision was getting closer, is the criminal element of these protests, overshadowing what the peaceful protesters are trying to say and what they're trying to bring about change and their freedom of speech. But they've been worried about the criminal element, those who have promised and threatened violence and what they would do. And police have said they're not going to allow it and they would make arrests. Here's back to that live picture along South Florissant. Just a surreal sight as we see the season's greeting banner draped over South Florissant, and you see the smoke all around and the huge police force on what was, you know, a busy, normal day in Ferguson, and this is what it has come to.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people expecting this kind of thing, and what's sad again is that even the father of Michael Brown has called for peaceful protests and people not to get violent and that kind of thing, and because he felt like it would be disrespectful to his son. And you wonder if these people that are doing this, do they care about that? Because they're basically saying we're going to do our own agenda and whatever Michael Brown, the senior, may desire.
One of the issues in all of this has been safety, and we've seen officials, we've seen their personal bank accounts broken into. We've seen the mayor, the police officers in this case, these internet groups be able to crack their financial information and basically steal their identities. Safety of police officers, law enforcement, city officials have been a big concern through all of this. And Pamela Means with us with the National Bar Association. We talked about this earlier. How do you protect the safety of the grand jurors in a situation like this? You try to keep their names private, but there is this element that can kind of crack into anything and find out anything that they want about you.
And I think you have to do everything within our power to erase it from any system that is out there. The ability for anyone to grab the name, we must eliminate that. We must, under all circumstances, keep the information private. I think that's also the reason why there should have been more careful consideration of whether or not you release any of this information. There should have maybe been a balance, because I think that people did not really pay attention to the tea leaves a little bit, that this could be the response. You could feel it in the atmosphere, though, that this was the possibility of the response. And I think that to protect the witnesses, the grand jury, they have to erase from any computer system. They must erase from any type of system, anything that would allow people to get a hold of their names, because it would be unfair for those individuals to sacrifice themselves and to do what is their civic duty, and to serve on a grand jury that is clothed in secrecy, and for that secrecy and for that safety to be compromised because we want to appease individuals. You don't appease individuals with information. You appease them by addressing the issue. And until we address the underlying issue, we're not going to be able to stop what we see here. I want peaceful protests. I want individuals, though, I wonder if in the call for the peaceful protest, have we had conversations with the right individuals? Have we talked to the young people, or have we talked for the young people? Have they been heard, or have they been spoken to, or instead of spoken with? And sometimes I think when people feel like they have not been heard, they feel like they're not respected. You know, you asked a very good question. Do they respect what Michael Brown's dad is saying? I think it's some of that, but I've said, and the National Bar has said from the beginning, some of this has something to do with Michael Brown, but it has a lot not to do with Michael Brown. It's a really bigger issue, and the bigger issue is there are individuals out there who could have been Michael Brown laying in the streets, and some of them don't know how to deal with that. And until we as a community, me being a leader, I grew up in this area. All of my life, I practiced law here. I'm not a national leader that is coming in to save the problem. This is my community. And until we define what the issue, which is changing the law, changing the standard. That's what McCullough was talking about, so that we don't see this and we educate young people and teach them the power of the vote. We're going to continue to see this. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see a police officer get hurt. I don't want to see a reporter get hurt. And I certainly don't want to see a citizen of Ferguson die, or a citizen from anywhere else die. But the protest that you see in Ferguson is happening in New York. It's happening in California, because the issue has little to do with Michael Brown and a lot to do with the epidemic that this country has.
Yeah, in fact, there was word that a lot of there would be protests in a lot of various cities across the country after this decision was handed down by the grand jury. Haven't heard a lot of reports about what's going on in the other parts of the country. We're pretty well tied up with taking care of what's happening right here. And as you're seeing, these are live pictures from near the Ferguson Police Department on South Florissant Road, with the police car on fire. It's exploded, in fact, the gas tank and that is exploded there. And there was another fire earlier, and it continues to burn, and the police presence has increased tremendously as the protesters did.
And as we watch these pictures, what has been happening since McCullough made his announcement, he vowed that he would release the evidence and he would release this information, testimony, what the grand jury heard, and we have a crew poring over those documents. But one of the things that he really brought a lot to light, there's been so much speculation, so many false reports in social media about who saw what, but he made a very good point of saying that the grand jury was the only group who heard every single bit of evidence and heard all of the witness accounts and heard a lot of witnesses who changed their stories. Witnesses who spoke with the media, went on national media and said one thing happened and later to discover that did not happen. So,
can I say that, but one problem with that is going to be, when I try a case, I put my best case forward.
Yeah.
There is going to be some people who will say that there is an appearance that McCullough didn't put his best case forward. Why would you put forward a witness who you know the story contradicts the evidence? When you try a case, you put your best facts forward. Why would you take a grand jury that's controlled by you and give it conflicting evidence? That's not giving it the best evidence. And I know that McCullough was trying to do, what he was attempting to do was to say, I am not trying to withhold from anyone the facts.
All the witnesses
I want all the witnesses
forward, give everyone a chance to speak.
Excellent trial attorney doesn't give a public what they want. They look for a win. And there's going to be some who do these cases that will say, why in the world would you put forward any witness that has conflicting evidence? You X those out. You let a defense attorney do that. You don't do that. So when you open the door to do what, you're right, he made a good statement in saying they got to see everything, but he's not the defense attorney. He's the prosecutor, which is why many people question, why would he put all of that forward? Why would you do this in a manner where you were prosecutor and defense attorney? I know the motive from a public perspective, but it has the appearance. It has the appearance, and that's some of the anger you're feeling. It has an appearance. Did you put forward your best case? Because isn't that your job, to put forward your best case? Not the whole case as everyone sees it, but absolutely, without question, the best case.
Well, and President Obama, in his remarks earlier that we had on, and we left him rather quickly because there was a lot going on here, but I kind of echoing what you said, he said that some people were happy, some were angry. He wasn't very, surprised at the response, but he also said that, he had asked Attorney General Holder to work with the police departments across the country because it wasn't just a Ferguson problem, it was America's problem.
Yes. I agree.
And there's continued live pictures there of aerial pictures of the police car on fire, and this has been. We haven't seen too much more of after the police are in the riot gear there, as you can see, and making the lines, and they were able to disperse a lot of the protesters a while ago with the smoke bombs that they sent out there. And but there's still apparently a sizable crowd of protesters there, and as you can see, some of it has turned violent.
And we are continuing to watch what is unfolding here, and this is going to be probably a very long night for people in that area. We have never seen something like this captivate the entire area, and where people were on edge, worried about their own safety. We've seen an increase in gun sales. We've seen more people putting in alarm systems in North County. We've seen all of that. So our area has been glued to this story and to see what the response would be. But tonight, St. Louis County Police Chief John Belmar issued another statement, and he basically said, we are not going to allow violence. The commanders have been meeting with local officials and protesters. The key is preservation of life, property, and that all citizens enjoy the freedom to express their constitutional rights. But they said, we will not allow violence, and they're doing their very best to make sure that no one is hurt. But we've already heard of rocks being thrown, concrete hitting people in the head, bottles being thrown at police. George Sells reported he heard a couple of gunshots in the distance, and we've been watching this police car burn for a while now, and you can see there's no one around. Police are making sure that no one gets close, and they're keeping an eye on the media. We have crews on the ground here, but this is a volatile, violent situation, and if our crews feel threatened, they're moving out and they're moving back, and we have to make sure that everyone is safe in a situation like this.
Yeah, George Sells had to move a while ago when there was some violence going on close to him, and he moved his crew back and then set up and continues to provide coverage of what's going on there tonight. We also heard Lacey Clay spoke a little earlier, Congressman Lacey Clay. Al Sharpton is holding a news conference tonight in New York with his national network, and is expected to be back in Ferguson tomorrow to hold a news conference at some time. Haven't heard a time on this yet with the Brown family. So this story is going to continue on for a while, and the reaction to the decision tonight that was announced by the grand jury that there would be no charges against Officer Wilson.
And the grand jury decision is only one piece of this entire puzzle and this whole story. The Department of Justice still continuing with its investigation, investigating whether Wilson violated Brown's civil rights. But one of the things Bob McCullough said tonight is they have shared all of their evidence with the Department of Justice. Local investigators, federal investigators, all have the same information. Here we're seeing some movement now. Police are running up to form a new line along South Florissant Road. So things are changing rapidly, and police are moving their lines and moving up. We see some smoke in the distance there. We've had reports of looting on South Florissant. We've seen some windows broken, and now we're seeing some people just walking along. A lot of people representing themselves as journalists and with their camera phones
journalists,
and saying they're media. Well, media is a loose term in all of this, so police are trying to keep the media safe as well, and this is this police car still burning, going to be like this for a while.
You know, Bob McCullough said that, as you mentioned, that there's a federal investigation going on at this time, and they made it clear at the very start of this that they would be parallel investigations. But on the other hand, they were sharing all of the information. And so the federal investigation continues. The FBI has an investigation, the civil rights, the Justice Department with the civil rights, possible civil rights violations. These continue, and I guess the family could still actually file a civil suit in this case.
That is exactly correct. Absolutely, without question.
Yeah, so this story is far from over. Now we've got, it looks like fire in, that looked like in a building there.
I'm not sure if that, I don't know if that was the building or coming off the windows or a reflection.
Might have been a reflection.
But that looks like another fire. If that's separate from the police car, this is another vantage point from one of our crews. We're just taking these live pictures, and so we're seeing this as you're seeing it at home. Police have moved up to a different area, but that looks like a different fire burning from the police car that we saw earlier.
Yeah, and we've got the people out there taking pictures of it, and there's what we're talking about. Well, that's the police car, yeah. And it may have been reflecting off some windows in a building or something. It looked like there was a separate fire. But there was a second fire earlier that looked like it was a bicycle on fire. Someone had set a bicycle on fire maybe, and then they managed to set a police car on fire. So there are a ton of protesters out there. There are also a ton of journalists. Some of them independent, call themselves citizen journalists, but a lot of journalists and our people are on the ground. We've got them. One surprising thing, though, is with all of this action, we're not surprised at all this action in front of the police department in Ferguson, but that Clayton, where the announcement was made, and has been the scene of other protests around the Justice Department or the Justice Center rather, and the police department, Clayton is almost empty, according to our reporters from earlier in the evening. But it's still fired up on South Florissant Road at the Ferguson Police Department.
We're getting reports that there is more looting taking place in Ferguson. We have our Bommarito Automotive Skyfox up over this. Really, from the air is the best vantage point to see this and to see the scope of how far these protests and this violence is spreading and where the fires are and all up and down. We've got a new fire burning. That looks like another police car.
It could be a second one. It's hard to.
Yeah, okay. We're going to continue to follow this. We're going to switch it over to Rafer and Sandy and begin Fox 2 News at 10. We will keep it. I want you to keep it right here live on Fox 2. We'll have continuing coverage all evening. Stay with us.
Coverage you can count on. This is Fox 2 News.
Tonight at 10, after 3 months of testimony.
After 3 months of protests and demonstrations.
A decision is reached in the Michael Brown shooting.
And returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
Tonight, coverage you can count on. The grand jury decided there would be no indictment against Officer Darren Wilson. Just over an hour ago, St. Louis County Prosecutor Robert McCullough wrapped up a news conference where he detailed the 3 months of testimony presented before the grand jury. McCullough identified conflicting witness statements, the results of 3 separate autopsies, and a timeline of the events that transpired leading up to the shooting on August 9th, leading jurors to make their decision.
They are the only people who have heard and examined every witness and every piece of evidence. They discussed and debated the evidence among themselves before arriving at their collective decision. After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
Well, the reaction has been immediate from all sides.
Yeah, police began to act as protesters surrounded a St. Louis County police car right after the announcement. We're going to show you right now. These are live shots in Ferguson. So far, it has been chaos down there. We've seen the smoke bombs being released. We've had things thrown at police officers. Now there's reports that 2 different police vehicles have been set on fire. You're seeing right now as the police armed in riot gear are marching down the street. They've been able to push the protesters back with the smoke bombs. But again, you can kind of see it right behind those officers there. Another police car is on fire. A bicycle was lit on fire earlier. So it is truly a chaotic situation in Ferguson.
Yeah, and our reporters were there on the ground and they had to get out of there. George Sells reported that he heard shots fired in front of Ferguson PD. We saw reports on social media that the police were using tear gas. They deny that. They say they've been using flashbangs and smoke pellets. Protesters have been hit with concrete. Bottles and rocks have been thrown, and it appears that pleas for peaceful protesting was pretty much a pipe dream. It is not happening, at least tonight. As you can see, the vehicles there on fire. We've heard reports of looting on South Florissant. Right now, our cameras are capturing these images for you as they happen.
And truly amazing images, as you can see right there. We have a live shot on the ground for you. We also have one from the air as we continue to follow the unrest in Ferguson. When the police first got to the area, there was a few protesters. They started with maybe 20 or 30 protesters. They gathered a couple of hours before the announcement. They were just standing around kind of waiting to see exactly what was going to come from the grand jury this afternoon. That crowd, as it got closer to the 8 o'clock hour, began to grow, and immediately following the announcement from Bob McCullough's office of the grand jury's decision, then immediately the protesters started throwing things at the officers, and you can see what's going on now. It's just escalated from that moment.
And it was fairly quickly. President Obama started addressing the nation and said that he urged protesters to show restraint. He urged officers also to show restraint. He denounced anybody using this as a platform for violence, and as he was saying that, that's when we started to see the images of a police vehicle being pushed over by protesters. That's when the smoke came out from police. So right now it appears we are right now in for a long evening, it would seem, but as the protesters are on the move. But you can see right there, that is that fluorescent we're looking at on the live picture on the left. It appears that the street is mostly empty as the burning vehicle continues. We believe that's fluorescent from a live picture from above. And then on the right, our crews walking on the ground.
We're going to continue to follow this. One of the things that Bob McCullough announced at the grand jury decision press conference was that through the Sunshine Law, he wanted to make sure that if there were no indictment, or if there was no indictment, that he would release all of the evidence and information that the grand jury was able to go over during this months-long investigation. We're going to go now to Fox 2's Andy Banker. He's live in our document center. They've got all that information. Elliot Weiler there as well. You guys, it's a lot of information to take in. You're getting it right now. What are you seeing so far? What can you tell us?
Sandy, thousands of pages now come into our newsroom in our document center here specifically, and we're just trying to sift through them all. Elliot and I right away have gone to Officer Darren Wilson's testimony. By the way, we want to reintroduce Amy Fight, a former assistant prosecutor for the city of St. Louis, who's now the prosecutor in Christian County, the elected prosecutor, and she is part of our legal team tonight, trying to go through all of this and piece together how it added up to no indictment of Officer Darren Wilson. You want to start here, Elliot?
Sure, and we should mention here that as we're reading this, this is going to be raw transcript testimony that St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCullough released. Just as you are watching raw video here, bear with us as we are going through this. We literally just downloaded this a few minutes ago. I want to pick it up here. It's kind of interesting here. If you listen to McCullough's news conference, they talked about the initial interaction in Canfield that Darren Wilson had with Michael Brown and the other gentleman. I'm going to read you directly from Darren Wilson's testimony. This is when he opened the door, or tried to open the door. As I did that, I got to open the door and I say, "Hey, come here for a minute." He says this to Brown. As I'm opening the door, he turns, faces me, looks at me and says, "What the F are you going to do about it?" and shuts my door, slammed it shut. I haven't even got it open enough to get my leg out. It was only a few inches. I then looked at him and told him to get back, and he was just staring at me, almost like to intimidate me or to overpower me. The intense face he had was just not what I was expecting from any of this. I then opened my door again and used my door to push him backwards, and while I'm doing that, I tell him to get the F back, and then I use my door to push him. Then there's a question from the prosecutor. "You tell him to get the F back?" "Yes." "Okay." Wilson. He then grabs my door again and shuts my door. At this time, I see him coming into my vehicle. His head was higher than the top of my car, and I see him ducking, and he is ducking. His hands are up, and he's coming in my vehicle. I shielded myself in this type of manner and kind of looked away. I don't remember seeing him come at me, but I was hit right here in the side of my face with the fist. I don't think it was a full-on swing. I think it was a full-on swing, but not a full shot. I think my arm deflected some of it, but there was still a significant amount of contact made to my face. Now, at this point, I'll just skip ahead here because they kind of talk about what response Darren Wilson did with that. I considered using my mace, but I didn't want to sacrifice my left hand because I couldn't block it. I couldn't reach around my right arm to get it, and if I would have gotten out, the chances of it being effective were slim to none. Then I'll continue on there. He says he does not carry a taser, so he considered using his ASP, that is the police baton, but to get to that, I kind of sit on it. I would have to lean forward and pull myself out to the steering wheel. Again, I wasn't willing to let go of one of the defenses I had against being hit. Again, skipping ahead here, he also considered using a flashlight. And then he says, so the only option I thought I had was my gun. I drew my gun, I turned. It is kind of hard to describe it. I turn and I go like this. He's standing there. I said, quote, "Get back or I'm going to shoot you." He immediately grabs my gun and says, "You are too much of a expletive to shoot me." the way he grabbed it. You have a picture, and then there is a picture kind of painting of what that interaction looked like. Andy has gone through some of the transcript after that, so I'll let him pick it up from there.
I picked it up, and bear with us because it's hard to read through this all in one sitting. And so Elliot and I are just taking different portions of Officer Darren Wilson's testimony before the grand jury. This is about 10 pages ahead of where you were, Elliot. This is when he describes the shooting and the gunfire and the confrontation as it went from there. How many times does it go off in the car, says the prosecutor in reference to Wilson's gun. It went off twice in the car. Pull, click, click, went off, click, went off. So a few times it didn't fire. So twice in the car, he said. Are you certain? He is asked, yes. Then he says, when I look up after that, I see him start to run. I see a cloud of dust behind him being Mike Brown. I then get out of the car. As I am getting out of the car, I tell dispatch, shots fired, send more cars. Amy, you say that's significant that he called, made a radio call there, or is it?
It may be. At this point, what you have is you have an officer who has described, that he's being assaulted, because we have his description of being assaulted. You have him now describing that he's fired shots in the car, and so you are looking to see what Mr. McCullough has already described in the press release with regards to talking about physical evidence and seeing whether or not there is anything that is consistent with what the officer has said. And so Mr. McCullough has spoken in his press release about the fact that there was physical evidence that would be consistent with shots being fired in the car, with Mr. Brown being physically present in the car, with the officers talked about him grabbing the gun, with the DNA being on the gun. So in other words, when the grand jurors or any jury for that matter, when they're making a determination with regards to making determinations as to who is believable and who is credible, ultimately they're going to be making determinations as to, is there physical evidence that is consistent with the testimony that's being given by a witness? Are there witnesses that are giving testimony that is consistent with one another? Are there inconsistencies, or is there testimony that's inconsistent with physical evidence? And up to this point, it sounds like what the officer has said, that there was physical evidence based on, because I know there's lots and lots of materials that have come in, and certainly there hasn't been time to review all of those, but again, based on what Mr. McCullough has already said, that there was physical evidence that was consistent with what you've read thus far in the...
I want to pick it up just a couple more lines, and then we'll send it back. This is from Darren Wilson. I know I missed a couple of shots. I don't know how many. He said that he started chasing, or that he and Mike Brown both started running. I shouldn't use the word chase. That's not in the transcript. I know I missed a couple of shots. I don't know how many, but I know I hit him at least once because I saw his body kind of jerk or flinch. I remember seeing the smoke from the gun, and I kind of looked at him. He's still coming at me. He hadn't slowed down. At this point, I start backpedaling, and again, I tell him, get on the ground, get on the ground. He doesn't. I shoot another round of shots. We'll continue to pour through the documents and bring you more as we get through them.
All right, Andy, thank you. We'll get back to them when we can. We're giving you a live shot right now from Bommarito Automotive Skyfox. This is up over Highway 44 in Grand. The highway is shut down there due to protesters. You can see quite a large number of people in that area right now. We're going to zoom in so you can get a little closer look, but we're getting reports now that no one can get through in that area as protesters have gathered there and have blocked that highway where no one can then pass through.
Earlier, Governor Jay Nixon in his press conference said he would allow protesters to gather in the streets and even shut down traffic, but there was no mention of highways. I mean, obviously this is a major thoroughfare, so we'll keep an eye on that. In the meantime, George Sells is back at the command center in Ferguson. George, I understand you had to leave and get out of there. What are you seeing right now, and is it safe for you out there?
Well, we're at the command center at this point, and they basically, this area, Lucas Pike and West Fourth, they set the parking lot pretty well shut off. I'm with Bonita Cornuda and Elliot Davis. We were all in the Ferguson area there a few minutes ago.
We were all in the Ferguson area there a few minutes ago as things got very dicey. You started hearing a lot of gunfire in the area. Police were firing off tear gas, trying to move the crowd down the street. And there was, at least as you've seen in the aerials, one police car that was set on fire. There were explosions from that car. And the biggest concern, as people were trying to run out of the way, was the gunfire you were hearing off in the distance. Bonita, come here with me, because you guys all got separated through all this. Describe what you were hearing, what you were seeing as we went through this.
Yeah, we actually saw people standing very quietly during the announcement as they were listening to Circuit Attorney.
Okay, we're sorry. We're going to interrupt Benita for just a moment. We need to get up to Bommarito Automotive Skyfox where Steve Myers is standing by. Steve, what's going on from your vantage point?
Well, hi, Sandy. Obviously, you can see several hundred people here. They are blocking Interstate 44 in both directions. I'll come out here just a little bit. That is Grand, the cross street going across, and that will take you in here a little bit tighter. You can see where it is blocked, headed westbound. The big blockage is eastbound. Not that it makes a difference. You can't get through in either direction. But obviously, you've got several trap cars in here, a tractor trailer. The police are here. They're behind these vehicles. I'm not exactly sure what their plan is to clear this out, but right now the protesters are in the middle of the roadway and they have 44 shut down in both directions. As soon as this changes, or if there's more to tell you, we certainly will. For now, we'll just go ahead and say live from Sky Fox, Steve Myers, Fox 2 News.
All right, Steve, thank you again. That's at 44 in Grand, traffic blocked in both directions, not being able to get through.
All right, let's take it back to George Sells at the command center. George, I'm sorry we interrupted you earlier. You're out there also with Elliot Davis, who's been on the ground since all of this happened. Can either one of you shed any more light on what's happening out there right now near Ferguson PD?
Yeah, I mean, well, like I said, we've backed out of that area at this point. Elliot had a really good view, actually, as things were first starting to disrupt. Things started getting a little hairy. Elliot was up high, kind of up on top of a wall. What were you seeing there, Elliot, as it was going on?
Well, it was the most amazing thing as we began to try to gauge what the reaction was going to be. The crowd, it was a large crowd. They were vocal, as Benita said just a short time ago. Everybody was silent as McCullough was speaking, as he was relaying the information. And then finally he got down to announcing just what the grand jury had indeed decided, and there was actually quiet even after that point. And you wondered what was going to happen. I think everybody's been, of course, hoping for peace. They were knowing there was going to be a protest. They were hoping for peace. And for a moment, just a moment, it seemed like that was going to happen. Then the crowd began to move towards the police officers, confronting the police officers, and then they moved back. And so there was kind of an ebb and flow for a while, and you just wondered which way things were going to go. But all of a sudden, as we stood there close to the police station, police had actually begun to move back a little bit, and then all of a sudden, shots started ringing out. About 4 shots in rapid succession started ringing out. The crowd then started running down the street. There was just a big number of people. If you can imagine, a crowd of about 300 people running all at once, trying to get out of the way. And so that crowd began to move on down the street there, and police, then extra police reinforcements kind of came in then at that point, and things just kind of began to fall apart. Then we started obviously seeing the reports of dumpsters on fire and cars on fire and some windows broken out. Things just started falling apart. Then the group started massing again in the middle of the street, essentially shutting down South Florissant Road. I had talked to some of the protesters beforehand, and I had asked, were things going to remain peaceful? This was a member of the clergy, and there were people in the clergy who were in the crowd. There were also some other people who were in the crowd, basically hoping to keep the peace, basically hoping to make sure things did not turn violent. And the word I got as I talked to the member of the clergy was that he had no idea. He said there were so many groups that were among the protesters, so many different groups with so many different interests. It was hard for them to even be able to communicate with them all. He said there was even dissension among some members of the clergy, some clergy who were calling for peace, and some other clergy who was identifying more with the protesters. And he even said at one point a member of the clergy was attacked because they were not with a faction that was within the group. So you've got all these disparate elements that were there. They were, and like I said, for a while, it seemed like there was going to be peace. The shots rang out, and all of a sudden there was pandemonium. Let me bring Benita Cornute back in here. Benita, just give us your impressions on what you saw.
Well, I saw quite a bit of movement when the gunshots rang out and then glass breaking. I think it was just bottles perhaps flying. But it was a situation where people felt very uneasy, and they felt that they had to move out quickly. But then you also saw amongst that crowd of people young people who seemed to be very energetic and very intent on trying to make a statement tonight. And as I was told by one young man that I interviewed, he simply said, we have not seen justice yet, and we're not through, and we're not tired. So at this point, we may see this carry into the night, well into the early morning hours, actually.
Did you get the feeling at a time, as I did, that maybe this thing was going to be peaceful?
It did feel that way. As the announcement was coming from Clayton, it seemed pretty calm. It seemed as though things were actually going to be okay, even no matter what the announcement was going to be. But very quickly, it changed, and that was news.
And that was the amazing thing, that it changed so quickly. Right now, I want to bring in Paul Shankman. I want to get Paul's perspective.
Well, I just want to tell you about something that just happened out here a couple minutes ago, Elliot. We were all sitting here in the media area, and suddenly a red pickup truck came through, and a bunch of cops came in all at once, and they got the guy out of the truck, had their guns drawn on him, got the guy down on the ground. Now, what he was doing that made them suspicious, we don't know. But a couple minutes later, by the end of the incident, they shook his hand and let him go. So we don't know what it was, but just to give you an idea of how high the tensions are, even here, a little bit removed from the hot zone down there, right, they had this guy surrounded with guns drawn. It was really kind of frightening.
All right, thank you, Paul. And obviously, as you said, tensions are very high, and now we're really sensing that. We kind of had a feeling that we knew that tensions were high. We knew that that something could happen, and now this decision's come down, and you're really feeling it.
Well, and this was the second individual who was up here that we saw confronted by the police. The other one was mild by comparison. About 3 officers talking to a guy who was, kind of giving him this a little bit, but again, they send him on his way. So obviously the command center is just around the corner from here, so they're going to be hyper vigilant around here. You may have noticed there's a National Guard Humvee that's running the perimeter here, kind of checking on things. Maybe that guy spotted something and called him. I don't know what made him suspicious, but they were really worried about him, obviously, there for a few seconds.
And clearly law enforcement is not taking any chances at all.
No, can't blame them.
All right, thank you, Paul. Well, that's basically where we stand right now. As I said, we're about a couple of miles away from the Ferguson police station. We were stationed there. We have been stationed there throughout the entire evening, obviously awaiting the reaction after the decision came down. We first got there. This crowd has just ballooned as the evening has gone on. When we first arrived, there were like, maybe 25 or 30 people there. But as we got closer and closer to 8 o'clock, the crowd swelled to something like 300 people who were there. And there was people would kind of move towards the police barricades and then shout at police officers, and then they would move back. And so, as I said, for a while there, we were hoping that it was going to be peaceful, that people were going to protest, and that there were not going to be violence. But as I heard, and George Sells, who's joining me again, and George heard the same thing as we stood there, and those shots rang out.
Yeah, there were there were some volleys early on as we were in the area right there by the police station. Then as we moved back, tell you a little bit about getting out of there. At one point, we pulled back. We kind of went back parallel to South Florissant Road, get back up to the north, trying to find a way to get out safely. That was where we encountered, at least from a distance, that burning police car that you saw from the air at one point. And at one point there, somebody had some kind of a semi-automatic weapon where they popped off a solid 20-25 shots, just one after the other. I don't know what, if any.
George, we're so sorry we have to interrupt right now, but we want to get to these pictures that we're showing you right now. On the right side of your screen, this is the Little Caesars Pizza. This is at Royal and North Florissant Road in Ferguson. You can see that that fire is fully engulfed. Behind them is a residence. A number of people live behind this pizzeria, and they are all being evacuated at this time. So again, this that you're looking at on the right side of your screen is the Little Caesars Pizza. It's at Royal and North Florissant. Every neighbor nearby is being evacuated at this time.
And it doesn't appear that firefighters are on the scene. Meanwhile, on the left-hand side, protesters have shut down Highway 44 at Grand, going both directions, and you can see that there is a semi-truck there parked with several protesters around. But we did see some pictures of police arriving on the scene, protesters standing there on the highway with their hands up. Right now, we are going to toss live. There you can see police there in riot gear behind the semi on the other side of the highway. Let's quickly now go to Betsy Bruce, who is live in Clayton, where the announcement was made earlier. And Betsy, protesters said they...
Yes.
I'm sorry, Betsy is at 44 in Grand. I apologize.
On I-44 at Grand, where a line of police officers has formed across both lanes of the highway, and a large crowd has gathered on the edge of the interstate. And as I turn this Skype over, you can see that they are blocking a semi-tractor truck and several cars. They are in the eastbound lanes, a large crowd on the highway, and also some up on the side of the highway. We're going to move. The officers are telling us to leave.
Betsy, we want you to be safe. You go ahead and leave and take the police orders right there. We're going to go up now into Sky Fox. Steve Myers is over the scene. Steve, talk about what you can see from where you are. It looks like that crowd is really growing, and it looks like it's a pretty tense situation right now.
Here, you can see this line of police officers here. It goes across both sides of the road. They are separated from the protesters basically by about the length of that semi-tractor trailer that's sitting there. They have not moved at this point, but obviously they plan to put an end to this sometime in the very near future. In contrast, the protesters have also formed that straight line across here in front of these vehicles, and they're as solid as the police department. So at this point, it's a bit of a standoff. I don't know when they will start moving, but I have to assume that they're being talked to now. Obviously, we have no way to hear that, but I have to assume that is going on. And the police are on both sides of the highway, just like the protesters. As soon as we can bring you a little more, we will. We're certainly going to continue to take a look at this and keep our eye on it. Back to you guys.
Steve, I don't know if you can still hear us or not, but again, we're just getting word that right in that area is where SLU Hospital and Cardinal Glennon Hospital is. So that could cause an obvious problem with trying to get people in and out of hospitals if need be. Can you give us an idea of if there's any way to get in and out of the hospitals, or is that completely blocked as well? And also, have you seen anybody get out of those vehicles that are being trapped by the protesters?
The hospital stuff is wide open, according to John Brubaker, our pilot tonight. We'll take you down the street there. That one's easy. Obviously, you can't use Interstate 44 to get there, but you can use the alternative roads like Grand and Lafayette and Park and some of the other places that are here. I have not seen anyone come out of those vehicles, and we were talking about that up here in the helicopter. That would be a little terrifying to be sitting in your vehicle and face this many people. So I don't really know what's happening with those folks, but I have not seen anybody come out of them. I also have not seen any protesters really approach the vehicles very much, other than to just walk around them. You can see that line a little bit of protesters there right in front of those vehicles. That is a solid line across the highway, and there's another one across the street here. There are not nearly as many people in the other lanes as there are here in the eastbound lanes, but you can see that there are hundreds of people here, and the police department is right there in a line, right there at the bottom of your screen, right past the bridge.
And Steve, is traffic backed up on the highway in either direction, or are vehicles just largely avoiding it altogether?
Well, for the westbound side, they've moved them off, and they're detouring them around. I don't know what route they've taken. The eastbound side, I'm sure they're taking them off at some point, but it is backed up, not quite to Kings Highway at this stage of the game. Obviously, there's not quite as much traffic at this time of night, but still Interstate 44 carries a considerable amount of traffic no matter what time it is. And, you know, once they back the traffic up, then they'll take the rest of it and just funnel it off onto a side street, and they'll get it around this particular problem another way.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Right now, let's go back down to Ferguson. Oh, hold on one second. We're going to give you a web camera here. Is this now, folks, if you can tell me if this is the Little Caesars? This is the public storage building.
Live picture, you can see smoke there. Is this in Ferguson?
We apologize, this is very fluid. We're getting information. We're trying to bring it to you just as quickly as we get it. What we do know right now, we showed you just moments ago, Little Caesars Pizza at Royal and North Florissant was fully engulfed in flames. The residents near that area were being evacuated. A little bit earlier than that, we know that a Walgreens was also set on fire. That was at North Florissant and Chambers. Also, 2 police vehicles earlier in the evening, and a bicycle. We thought it was a bicycle. It turned out to be a piece of art, was also set on fire earlier this evening. We're right now trying to check with the fire departments to see exactly how they're able to get to all of these fires at this point. If they have the resources available. I know that the National Guard was brought in earlier to try to add manpower to the police departments, the fire departments, that sort of thing, so that it would free up our fire and our police and our emergency responders. You look at the Walgreens. Again, this Walgreens is at North Florissant and Chambers. It was set on fire earlier, and then we showed you that fully engulfed in flames was the Little Caesars Pizza at Royal and North Florissant, and that area is being evacuated by the residents.
And it looks like firefighters are on the scene trying to put the flames out. The protesters have clearly been moving. Before we move on, sorry, Mandy, did you say that, was there some information that we needed to get as far as that?
There's more fires than they can handle.
There's more fires than they can handle.
Bringing in mutual aid.
Okay, yeah. There's more fires than firefighters can handle right now, so they're doing the best that they can, and now they are, right now they are getting to that Little Caesars fire, but there again, you can see the protesters shutting down 44 and Grand. So it appears that the protesters have a plan. And they started with Ferguson, and this is just, it does not, you know, appear by accident that they've arrived at this spot to shut down traffic. The question is, how long will they stay here? Will they stay here for much of the evening? Will they move on to another location? Governor Nixon said that he would allow protesters to stop traffic as long as they stayed peaceful. But a lot of the protests, as Elliot Davis and George Sells told us earlier, have not been peaceful because, well, there's been fires, as you can see, and there's been shots fired and bricks being thrown. But right now, the rioters, or the protesters, I should say, right now are just standing their ground, as are police at 44 and Grand, and firefighters again are trying to put out this fire here at the Little Caesars, and it appears they are making some headway with that fire.
Yeah, and we had reported that that was on North Florissant. It's actually at Royal and West Florissant Road, that Little Caesars. And you mentioned, Rafer, earlier that they had talked about during the press conference earlier today that they were going to allow people to exercise their freedom of speech. However, they said they were drawing the line at anything like we're seeing tonight, and that they did have all of the pieces in place to make sure that the people and property were protected, as well as free speech, but they were not going to allow this to happen. We've seen a large police presence. Earlier this week, Jay Nixon declared a state of emergency, and the National Guard were brought in for tonight. They're acting in a backup capacity. They're reporting to the police departments and the fire departments and to utility substations so that those places can be secure while the police and firefighters deal with the types of things that you're seeing right now.
And during the president's speech, as he was making a plea for protesters not to damage property, you saw protesters trying to overturn a police car. That police car was later was later set on fire, and then the protesters, they moved from there. So but the police then used what appeared to be tear gas, but they tell us it was not tear gas. They are telling us that it was flashbangs and smoke pellets and not actual tear gas. So in terms of, and you were here when the protesters and police first clashed back in August, it appears the police are are standing back a little bit with protesters this time compared to when things escalated the last time?
Well, I think they definitely have a strategy this time. I think that they have all of the resources in place, and they've brought in additional resources. Police officers have been trained for any kinds of situation that might occur like this. So I think that what you're seeing tonight is just more of an organized reaction to what we're seeing from protesters this evening.
And we're seeing organized protest right now. At this particular juncture, there appears to be nonviolent as they're blocking the freeway down right there. Mandy Murphy has been also following the story, as have we all. And Mandy, you have some new information for us?
Well, we've all been working our sources and talking to a lot of different people. And a source tells me, where is the National Guard in this situation? That there are no National Guard in Ferguson. There's National Guard in Clayton, but that there are no National Guard in Ferguson protecting any of their businesses, their police departments, their fire departments, and that the city was promised National Guard support early on, and tonight they don't have any. And there are a lot of people who are upset about this and wondering if that could have made a big difference, because you're seeing all this widespread looting, fires being set, and the governor came in and said, we're going to provide National Guard troops. We're under a state of emergency. We can bring in more if we need them, but where are they in Ferguson?
Well, do you think that there was a miscommunication, Mandy? Because I think that they had said that the National Guard was going to be in a support role, that they weren't going to be front lines, that they were going to be back at the police departments, at the fire stations, kind of filling in those gaps as our first responders, our police, our firefighters went out to handle this. So do you think that maybe there was just a miscommunication, that the people, the residents, thought that the National Guard was going to be out there on the streets with them?
I don't think it was a miscommunication. I think that my sources tell me that the city was promised National Guard support early on from the governor, and they're not getting it. And they could really use it right now.
I bet.
Perhaps a miscalculation over what they expected.
Well, the city has 400, and they're protecting firehouses. They're protecting these key areas. There's a lot of National Guard in Clayton right now at the Justice Center, and there's nothing going on. And this is what's happening in Ferguson right now. But what I can tell you is that my sources say there aren't any National Guard right now in Ferguson. And there simply aren't enough fire crews to handle all of these fires that are breaking out. Either they can't get there, or they don't have enough crews to follow all of these. You saw one fire truck at the scene here. So it's a very difficult situation for a lot of Ferguson officials to be in, but that's one issue that is being brought up. We are under a state of emergency, and is there any National Guard in Ferguson? I'm told there's not.
All right, maybe that'll change after your report, Mandy. Let's hope so. Let's right now go out the left side of your screen. What you're looking at is a shutdown by protesters at 44 and Grand. Betsy Bruce is there live. Betsy, what can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that there's still a fairly large crowd, probably about 200 people, that are blocking the eastbound lanes of the interstate, just on the east side of the Grand Overpass. Another large crowd, it's more like 400 people along the side of the road, and people are yelling obscenities at police officers. We have officers, some in riot gear, some not, clearly trying to control the crowd. They diverted traffic off the highway. The westbound I-44 traffic is being diverted, and I think the eastbound, they're trying to stop a bit further to the west.
Betsy, are you fearing for your safety at all in any way? It sounds like you're fairly close.
I mean, it's a large crowd. We are standing right near Grand by the sidewalk up on at the edge of the overpass, and we may be needing to move here shortly. Our photographer, Dave, is a little bit closer to things, and we'd like him to get back up here, but we've sort of been disconnected here because the officers told us to move, and we did move. Let me take a look here. There are a lot of people taking video of this. Police are walking away, crossing Grand, and another group that appears to have more riot gear is moving down on the highway. So basically a changing of the guard here going on, and we're walking away from this edge of the interstate. They would like to have these people move off the interstate, but there's a large crowd there, and not quite sure how they're going to convince them to do that at this point.
All right, now let's go live up to Steve Myers at Bommarito Automotive Skyfox. He's got a broader view of things. And Steve, it looks like they're clearing off the roadway.
Well, it kind of looks to me, Rafer, like they're clearing themselves off the roadway. I should tell you, as we come back here, you know, for the longest time, there was only a line of police across both sides of the road. There's now a line of police at the top of that ramp. And when that group of patrol officers showed up, or you know, I'm not sure what they're wearing, but anyhow, most of this crowd started to go back up the hill at that particular juncture. And so, you know, perhaps they've decided this is over at this point, and they really don't want to get any worse or more involved with the police department, which has obviously come here with a show of force and, you know, let folks know that at some point they were going to take some sort of action. There's still a little group here in the highway, but they do appear, for the most part, to be sort of moving themselves out slowly. And a lot of these cars that are sitting there, I'm sure, cannot wait for some of these people to move so they can get out of there, because they've been here for quite a while and probably at this point just need to go someplace and sit calmly, because that's a little harrowing when a bunch of people surround you in a car. Still, you know, even though most of the people have moved, not everybody's moved. So, you know, it's a guessing game here as to when the police will move forward and decide to open the highway back up. For now, we'll throw it back to you, and we'll keep our eye on this.
All right, Steve, thanks so much. We're going to go back to the Walgreens store that was lit on fire earlier. As we show you these pictures, we do want to tell you that we're getting some scanner traffic right now, that police and fire trucks have moved from the public storage fire because of shots fired in that area. But again, you're looking now at the Walgreens store that was set on fire earlier. This is at North Florissant and Chambers Road. Also, Little Caesars Pizza at West Florissant and Royal, also that was set on fire earlier, as well as 2 police vehicles and a piece of artwork in the area. Mandy Murphy was just on set with us, and she was reporting that at this point there are so many fires, it's very difficult for the fire crews to be able to get to all of these and to be able to get them under control in a timely fashion.
And we read reports that Walgreens was looted, and it appears that that was the case. That was not the only business in the Ferguson area that was looted. This despite numerous pleas by local leaders, civic leaders, church leaders, Reverend Al Sharpton, Lacey Clay, all pleading, please, please do not resort to violence. Do not let Michael Brown's death be in vain. His own father said that. And we are looking at the looting, the damage there of the Walgreens. And as Sandy said, firefighters had to pull out because of shots fired. George Sells was in front of Ferguson PD. He had heard shots fired there. But again, could this have been quelled with the presence of the National Guard? We don't know, because they are, well, we have not seen them. According to Mandy, they are in Clayton at the county seat, in case protesters should move there. Now, on the left, it appears that they are moving off of 44 and Grand. It would appear that the protesters have a schedule, that this is organized. This is not happenstance. Let's go to Shirley Washington. Shirley, where are you?
Rafer, I am at the command center here in Ferguson, and I can tell you that it is very quiet right now. However, a short time ago, there were dozens of police officers with their flashing lights that ripped across the parking lot and headed out. We have no idea where they were going or what call they were responding to, but I can tell you they moved out of here quickly. Now, just a short time ago, maybe 20, 30 minutes ago, there was a guy who showed up driving a red pickup truck. He came right across us here where we're doing our live shot, and there were about a dozen police officers that were on him really quickly with their weapons drawn. He got out of the vehicle. They had him on the ground. They searched him, picked him up, and talked with him a little bit, and after a few minutes, they shook his hand and let him go. We have no idea what that situation was all about, but I can tell you it speaks volumes about just how tense things are out here tonight. Now, earlier, we attended a prayer service with Archbishop Robert Carlson. We had a soundbite with him as he talked with parishioners at Calcutta Church. Let's take a listen.
I and other religious and civic leaders
have repeatedly called for prayer and peace and calm. Since the grand jury received this case in August, we have seen offensive and violent outbursts by protesters and acts of civil disobedience. And despite our calls for peace, which even Michael Brown's family has echoed again and again, we continue to see that segments of our community have not fully renounced the tendency to lash out with antagonistic behavior and violence. With that in mind, I believe that we must hear today a voice, the only voice, choose peace.
Archbishop Carlson and several religious leaders, from Rabbi Susan Talvey to Dean Michael Kinman to Pastor Robert White, have all been working in the community, working with the protesters, trying to help them deliver their message peacefully and making sure that the violence that erupted tonight wouldn't happen. So it seems as if their efforts to make sure that there was peace has fallen on deaf ears as the situation is growing tenser by the moment throughout the St. Louis area. I can tell you just a short time ago there were sounds of gunfire here at the command center, but it seemed as if it was in the distance, but we could hear it here. We can also see the police officers zipping across the parking lot, heading out onto the main thoroughfare, heading towards Ferguson. So for now, you look around, it's very calm. There's a fire truck that's driving across the parking lot right now, but it is not moving as if there is a sense of urgency. So right now here at the command center, things are very quiet. There are no members from law enforcement here that are coming out to talk with us, to give us any type of updates. So for now, I can tell you things seem to be very, very quiet at the moment. So I'm going to send it back to you.
All right, Shirley Washington reporting out there at Command Center. Right now, we're showing you on the right over West Florissant some fires. That appears to some more fires burning, as we reported earlier. The fire departments, or the fire officials and firefighters, there's just not enough of them to fight all of the fires that are sparking up around the area.
Yeah, again, this is just live shots right now of the smoke billowing over the West Florissant area. Again, what we know for sure is 2 police vehicles were set on fire, a piece of artwork that looked like a bicycle. We originally thought that it was a bicycle. That was set on fire. A Walgreens store at North Florissant and Chambers set on fire. Little Caesars Pizza at Royal and West Florissant also set on fire. That one is probably the largest fire that we've seen, and the area around that fire was evacuated.
And we were told that firefighters had to pull out because shots were fired also in the area. And then meanwhile, on the left, protesters at 44 and Grand appear to be dispersing and moving on to another location. This is after they completely shut traffic down for a long period of time. Meanwhile, protests are going on in other parts of the country: Chicago, Oakland, New York. Also, lots of protesters are out and about, and a large police presence following them. As far as the protesters here, it appears they are moving to another location, and we will continue to follow them and see where they go and where they are headed.
Repeated calls for peace tonight from not only President Obama, Michael Brown's family, local clergy, Bob McCullough's office, everyone calling for peace. I feel like tonight, as we watch this, that the protesters had a plan in place, and they stood very calmly in smaller numbers up until the 8 o'clock announcement from Bob McCullough's office of the grand jury's decision. And the minute that that announcement was made, then we saw them take action, and you're seeing the results of that action right now. And
a large number of the protest groups have spoken out against looting, against violence. So, you know, Elliot Davis said that it's a different faction of folks. Right now, we're showing looting on the right at O'Reilly Auto Parts. That is in Ferguson, folks. Is that what we're hearing? That is in Ferguson. Looters right now at the O'Reilly Auto Parts, breaking windows and running into the business and looting it and running away. So the looting continues in Ferguson tonight after the announcement that there will be no indictment of Darren Wilson. Excuse me. And showing you live pictures right now, and it does not appear to be a large police presence right there. And they could probably use some help from the National Guard. Mandy Murphy says that her sources tell her that officials are upset that they're not getting more support from the National Guard to quell some of this looting. We talked about the state of emergency that Governor Nixon had declared, but it appears that they were not, or did not have, the resources to quell looting in the Ferguson area, as you see the cars speeding off right now after looters come running out of the O'Reilly Auto Parts store.
It looks like a drive-through for looting. It looks like the cars are pulling up to the door. Folks are running in, grabbing what they want, and running out, jumping in the car and taking off. Again, we're not seeing any police presence in that area right there. That is at the O'Reilly Auto Parts. On the other side of your screen, on the left side of your screen, you're looking at protesters. They're walking. Give me this location again, please. So they're walking south on Grand from Highway 44. This is toward the Shaw neighborhood, and again, there's quite a large presence in this area, as you can see.
And the Shaw neighborhood, of course, the site of where Von Derek Myers Jr. was also killed by a police officer, and there were plenty of demonstrations after that happened. It appears that that is their next location. As Sandy said, this appears to be a very organized protest. Now, excuse me, these protesters have not appeared in these pictures, have not directly engaged police, and police have not engaged them, at least in these pictures. Now in Ferguson, it was a different story, but following them here at 44 and Grand, they are moving. They are moving in a non-violent fashion, and now they're moving on to another location in the South Shaw neighborhood to take their protests to that position.
And as you continue to look at this video that's on the screen right now, we do want to go up to Steve Myers. He's in Bommarito Automotive Skyfox over the scene. Steve, give us the latest from your vantage point.
Well, hey, Sandy, these folks, the entire group that was in the highway is now headed southbound on Grand Avenue. I have to push this camera out a little bit to figure out exactly where they are. They're not quite down to Tower Grove Park yet, but they are all headed there, several hundred of them headed down the southbound side of Grand Avenue now. Northbound is getting by okay. The police are behind them. I mean, there's a considerable police presence back there at that intersection coming right off of 44. But for now, these people are just peacefully marching in the street to a location that I'm certainly unaware of, but they all seem to be hanging together there, and again, they continue to walk. As we get more, we'll certainly bring it to you. For now, we'll throw it back to you.
All right, Steve, thank you. We do want to let you know that we've talked to the St. Louis County Police Department. They are confirming that tear gas was used this evening. We had gotten reports that it was just the smoke pellets. They said they did use smoke pellets first to try to disperse the crowds. When that did not work, they did release tear gas in the area.
Yep, they did confirm that. And again, on the right, we're seeing more fires. And folks, guys, where's that fire? Is that in Ferguson? And do we know what that building is? We don't know the exact location, but as we reported earlier, it's still over West Florissant, and we just have too many fires in that area for firefighters to be able to contain them all. And as they were fighting a fire earlier, shots fired forced them to pull out. So essentially, they're forced to allow these fires and buildings just to burn, essentially. Meanwhile, an organized protest on your left side of the screen is marching into the South Shaw neighborhood with some vehicles in front. And we do have a statement from the Brown family. Sandy,
right.
why don't you take that?
The Browns released a statement, and this is what it says. It says, "We are profoundly disappointed that the killer of our child will not face the consequences of his actions. While we understand that many others share our pain, we ask that you channel your frustration in ways that will make a positive change. We need to work together to fix the system that allowed this to happen." The statement continues by saying, join with us in our campaign to ensure that every police officer working the streets in this country wears a body camera. We respectfully ask that you please keep your protests peaceful. Answering violence with violence is not the appropriate reaction. Let's not just make noise. Let's make a difference.
And shortly after that, Officer Darren Wilson's legal team also released a statement, and we might get to that in a little bit. All right, let's get to that right now. It reads, in part, law enforcement personnel must frequently make split-second and difficult decisions. Officer Wilson followed his training and followed the law. We recognize that many people will want to second-guess the grand jury's decision. We would encourage anybody who wants to express an opinion to do so in a respectful and peaceful manner. Officer Wilson would like to thank those who have stood by his side throughout the process. This continued support is greatly appreciated by Officer Wilson and his family.
And as we're continuing to look at at this video. Again, this is at 44 and Grand as protesters march down the street, heading toward the Shaw neighborhood. Rafer, one of the things, we listened to Bob McCullough's statements earlier tonight, and as he made the announcement, he said there was no probable cause to indict Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown. But one of the things he said is that the prosecuting attorneys presented 5 potential indictments to the grand jury, and they rejected all of those.
Betsy Bruce is in South Grand and appears to be following the protesters. Betsy, what can you tell us what you're seeing?
Well, we are standing on the southern edge of I-44 along Grand by the Anheuser-Busch Eye Institute building, a healthcare building familiar to many people here in this neighborhood, and right across from the Compton Water Tower. A line of police in riot gear stretched across Grand with some vehicles, some ambulances behind them. I can't see the highway anymore, but it would appear as if they had moved a good many people off the interstate and the side of the highway. And as I move around behind me, I'm going to show you some distant lights. There's traffic heading south on Grand.
All right, we apologize. We're having a little difficulty hearing Betsy, having some audio problems there. If we can reconnect with her, we will definitely do that.
And now we're showing you pictures again of Florissant on the right. And, you know, at the risk of it, I mean, you hate to see this. You know, this community has suffered so much already. They were the ones crying out for protests to be peaceful. They are trying to heal as a community. And for all of these fires to be breaking out in their area, it's just awful. Meanwhile, protesters are moving along in an organized fashion. You have to believe that these fires were committed by, this is a storage facility in West Florissant.
And this is actually the area where fire crews did respond and had to actually leave because of shots fired in the area. So it was an unsafe situation. They had to leave, and you can see there that it's fully engulfed.
And there was one residence that was evacuated behind the Little Caesars Pizza. Again, there are too many fires for firefighters to simply get to, and you hope that they could get some help from neighboring areas. But in the meantime, as you said, going back to Bob McCullough's press conference earlier today, he said that 5 indictments were presented and they would not indict him on any of the 5 charges. He cited that witness testimony was inconsistent and contradicted, specifically the position of Brown's hands and where they were. Said some witnesses said that Brown was full charge towards Wilson. But the problem with the grand jury and with not everybody reading those documents, a lot of people have made up their minds. But those documents and all that evidence has been released. It has been unsealed. Our team has been pouring through it, and it is available for people to consume. But right now, people want to have their voices heard. And it looks like on the left, we're seeing the protesters moving southbound.
Some irony here, because the protesters are there saying they want justice for Michael Brown, but I just read the statement from Michael Brown's family, and it says, "We respectfully ask that you keep your protests peaceful. Answering violence with violence is not the appropriate reaction." So again, irony. The Brown family is saying this is not what we want. We want our voices to be heard in an appropriate way, to make change, not to have violence occur on the streets where we live.
And you're looking at 2 different incidents, so you got to believe maybe you're looking at the work of 2 different groups. I mean, all along there have been other groups that have wanted violence, have wanted to use this as a platform for violence, as some have said. And the fires on the right, clearly an example of that. And again, the Ferguson community has certainly suffered enough. It doesn't need to see it burn to the ground.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like we were just talking about the documents that were released as far as the evidence for the grand jury. We said that we had Andy Banker and Elliot Weiler pouring over those documents with some experts back there. Let's head now to our document center live with Elliot Weiler. Elliot, I know you guys have been pouring through a lot of information. What can you tell us at this point?
Just first tell you sort of what we are looking at here. This is an unprecedented move, as best we can tell, when the prosecutor would release a transcript from the grand jury, and that's what we are looking at. Thousands and thousands of pages that we've had a little bit of time to look at. We've been concentrating kind of on 2 areas here. Officer Darren Wilson's testimony. Andy's going to kind of pick up where we left off with that. And then I've got some eyewitness testimony here. And again, I think our prosecutor here, Amy Fight, from the Christian County Prosecutor's Office, she is the prosecutor for Christian County, has said that, you know, what typically happens is that in a case like this, you look for consistencies and inconsistencies in any case. And that's kind of what we have been trying to do with these documents. And we've been hearing a lot of what Officer Wilson had to say in terms of the justification in his mind to use force.
Well, and we can start with what he said and then sort of see the consistency she's talking about with some of the other witness statements. Although certainly we haven't poured through every single witness. We're still trying to identify Dorian Johnson, the man who...
Well, and these are redacted documents, we should mention, too. The only one we know for sure is Darren Wilson.
It takes some time to make sure we get the right name with the right witness to the extent that we can even do that. But here is Wilson describing the situation after the initial interaction with Mike Brown, after he said they ran from the car. The gun went off twice while Wilson was in the car, and he says Mike Brown was reaching through it. So this is when he talks about moving down the street, Canfield, both of them out of the car at this point. This is Officer Darren Wilson. So when he stopped, I stopped, and then he starts to turn around. I tell him to get onto the ground, get on the ground. He turns, and when he looked at me, he made like a grunting, like aggravated sound, and he starts, he turns, he's coming back towards me. His first step, he's coming back towards me. He kind of does like a stutter step to start running. When he does that, his left hand goes in a fist and goes toward his side. His right one goes under his shirt and his waistband, and he starts running at me. You say under his shirt, a prosecutor asks. Wilson says yes. That was all done, like I said, the first step, his first stride coming back towards me. As he is coming towards me, I tell him to get on the ground. He doesn't. I shoot a series of shots. I don't know how many I shot, but I just shot it. I know I missed a couple. I don't know how many, but I know I shot at him at least once because I saw his body jerk and flinch. At this point, it looked like he was almost bulking up to run through the shots, like it was making him mad that I'm shooting at him. And the face he had was looking straight through me like I wasn't even there, like there wasn't even anything in his way. Well, he keeps coming after me, and during that pause, I tell him, get on the ground, get on the ground. He still keeps coming at me, gets about 8 to 10 feet away. At this point, I'm backing up pretty rapidly. I'm backpedaling pretty good because I know if he reaches me, he will kill me.
That's from Officer Darren Wilson.
That's from Officer Darren Wilson. So now, can you pick it up somewhere?
Sure. So we have some witness testimony here. This I will read to you. This is a transcript, actually, from a witness interview with a detective that was presented to the grand jury. This person only identified as Witness 10. He runs, he being Michael Brown, he runs. He's at a charging motion. Detective, okay, where are his hands at this time? Do you know? Witness, I'm not sure where his hands were at this time. All I know is I'm seeing him coming at a very aggressive speed and just in a charge mode toward the police officer. Detective, is this a trot, or is it a jog, or is it full out? The witness, no, it's full out. I'm coming charge full blown to try to get you. Detective, okay, and so the officer fires the first shot, and he's how far away? Witness, 10 yards. Okay, how many times do you think he fires? I think he fires 5 to 6 rounds. That's from one witness. And then Andy and I have both been looking over this. I want to just hold this up here. This is what was submitted as a journal entry from one of the witnesses who we then presumably was followed up and interviewed. It's kind of unclear as to what role this exactly played, but what we do know is that this is a journal entry that someone wrote down basically recounting his or her activities, an eyewitness account of the day that Michael Brown was killed. And again, this is about a 4-page entry here. This person says, I heard 3 bangs, but the big kid would not stop. I heard the cop say something, but not sure what it was, if he was just making noise. Cop took a couple steps forward, then backwards, and the gun went off 2 more times. The last one on the top of the kid's head. Oh my God, the blood. Excuse me. So this is, I think what is so dramatic about this is as you read this and you basically see the human element of this. We'll go ahead. We'll send it back to you.
Absolutely, Elliot. Andy, thank you so much. We're going to come back out now to the desk. Dan Gray is joining us. And Dan, all of this now has had an effect at Lambert Airport. You guys have been working in the newsroom following all of the other elements. What have you learned?
Yes, Sandy, there have been some reports concerning the operations at Lambert St. Louis International Airport tonight. There you see a live picture of the airport. What we have been told in the last half hour, within the last 30 minutes, the FAA has issued a temporary flight restriction for Lambert Airport, meaning there are no arrivals at Lambert, but they can still have departure flights, and this is because of the unrest in Ferguson. Of course, Lambert Airport, located in North St. Louis County, not too far from Ferguson, and as some of that unrest spreads, the FAA thought it would put a temporary what's called a TFR, a temporary flight restriction, in effect until further notice. It went into effect less than a half an hour ago, and it will stay in effect until further notice. Again, no arriving flights at Lambert, but departure flights are not affected. They are still taking off.
And what about just the helicopters, the police choppers, the news choppers, all of that? Will those still be able to fly over the incidents we've been getting video from?
Yeah, those are unaffected. Okay. This just concerns Lambert Airport. It may concern some of the other airports in the St. Louis area as well. The FAA, issuing this temporary flight restriction for Lambert. It may do some others for some other smaller airports as the night goes on or tomorrow morning. We'll just have to wait and see. But the FAA in Kansas City is monitoring it. As a matter of fact, an FAA representative is in St. Louis tonight, keeping an eye on the situation.
All right, Dan Gray, thank you so much. We appreciate it. That does it for our extended coverage at Fox 2 News at 10. As you continue to look at this video, we're going to bring in Mandy Murphy and Tom O'Neill. So don't go anywhere. We will continue to follow all of the developments after the announcement of the grand jury's no indictment against Officer Darren Wilson. Stay with us.